In church, they used to point at her. That woman is lucky. God has really done it for her. They admired her smile. They admired her husband. They admired her life. What no one knew was that some nights she lay awake in that same marriage, staring at the ceiling, wondering if she would survive till morning. This is not a motivational story. This is what really happens when pain learns how to smile in public. Victoria had imagined this life long before it arrived, long before anyone ever called her pastor's wife. As a young woman, while her friends dreamed of bankers, oilmen, politicians, and men with foreign accents, Victoria dreamed differently. She wanted a pulpit close enough to touch. She wanted a man whose voice trembled with scripture, whose hands lifted heavenward on Sundays, whose life looked like service. She wanted to be that woman, the one sitting beside a man of God, smiling softly while the congregation whispered admiration. Pastor's wife, she would say under her breath sometimes, testing the words like a prophecy. Men came, they always did. Good men, kind men, flawed men, earnest men. Some loved her deeply, some chased her patiently, but she brushed them off with gentle smiles and spiritual language. You are not who God has shown me. I am waiting on divine alignment. My husband will be a pastor. Eventually, people stopped asking questions. They assumed she was too selective, too spiritual, too unrealistic. But Victoria didn't care. She wasn't confused. She was convinced. So when Pastor Fred noticed her after a midweek service, when he asked for her number with calm certainty and pastoral warmth, her heart didn't leap. It settled, like something clicking into place. This is it, she thought. This is God. She didn't pray about it, not properly. She didn't fast. She didn't ask difficult questions. Why would she? The answer looked like a dream. Pastor Fred was everything she had imagined and more. Soft-spoken, generous, always helping someone, always giving food, money, clothes, rides, encouragement. People praised him endlessly. Your pastor is a rare man. Your pastor has a heart of gold. God bless your pastor. Victoria soaked in it all like sunlight. During their courtship, Pastor Fred was attentive in public ways. He remembered birthdays. He prayed beautifully. He gave to others lavishly. She mistook his generosity to the world as proof he would be generous at home. That assumption would later cost her more than she could have imagined. Their wedding was grand, not excessive, but glorious. The church was full, camera flashed, choir sang. Women looked at her with longing. Lucky woman, God has favored you. I wish I were you. Victoria smiled until her cheeks hurt. She believed every word. The first few months felt like reward. Titles followed her everywhere. Mama, pastor's wife, our mommy. She learned how to sit beside him in church, when to nod, when to smile, when to look prayerful. She learned how to laugh even when tired. She learned how to disappear into grace. But inside the house, something was wrong. It didn't announce itself loudly. It crept in quietly, wearing normalcy. At first, it was small things. Can you handle groceries this month? Use your salary for now. I will sort it later. Later never came. Victoria paid the rent. Victoria paid the utilities. Victoria bought food. Victoria handled transport. She told herself it was temporary. Marriage had seasons, after all. She was working. She could manage. But months passed. When she asked him directly, carefully, respectfully, he would respond with scripture. A wise woman builds a home. Submission is sacrifice. God rewards cheerful givers. And whenever she pressed for that, his tone would harden. You're working, aren't you? So what's the problem? Do you want people to say a pastor can't manage his home? Meanwhile, Pastor Fred never stopped giving outside. Church members testified weekly. Pastor paid my hospital bills. Pastor helped me with rent. Pastor gave my children food. They would hug Victoria every service. "Thank you, Mama. God bless you for sharing your husband." She smiled, always smiled. At work, her colleagues noticed the same two pairs of shoes, the same faded handbag, the same clothes rotated carefully. They whispered amongst themselves, "Isn't her husband a pastor? She looks stressed. Maybe church work is draining her." If anyone asks, she brushed it off. "I'm fine, all is well, God is faithful." Inside, she was drowning. By the time she got pregnant, her body was already exhausted. Pregnancy only deepened the weight. Medical bills, baby items, checkups, transport. She paid for everything. Pastor Fred would pray, bless her belly, preach sermons about God's faithfulness, then hand her nothing. Pregnancy did not bring rest, it magnified everything. Victoria woke up tired and went to bed even more exhausted. Simple tasks left her breathless. Some mornings, standing for too long made her knees tremble. She began to forget things, appointments, dates, even words in the middle of sentences. Her appetite disappeared, not because she wasn't hungry, but because eating felt like another chore she didn't have the strength for. When she did eat, it was whatever was cheapest and fastest. Nutrition became an afterthought. Survival took priority. At night, sleep avoided her. She lay awake listening to Pastor Fred's steady breathing, her mind racing with calculations, hospital bills, transport fares, baby clothes she hadn't bought yet. Sometimes, fear sat so heavy on her chest that she had to sit up just to breathe properly. Her body started sending quiet signals, frequent dizziness, blurred visions, headaches that came without warning, a weakness that settled deep in her bones. She brushed them aside. It's pregnancy. Women go through worse. God will strengthen me. She had learned to minimize her pain the same way she minimized her needs. The warning signs had been there long before that night. The night Pastor Fred came home late. She had warmed his food twice before finally covering it. By the time he arrived, she was already exhausted. He ate in silence. She watched him, wanting to say something, needing to say something, but her strength failed her again. After he went to bed, Victoria stood up slowly to use the bathroom. Halfway there, her vision blurred. The dizziness hit harder than before. Sudden, violent. Her ears rang. Her heart pounded wildly, like it was trying to escape her chest. She reached for the wall, missed it. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the floor. The impact knocked the breath out of her. The world went dark, as if someone had switched off the light inside her head. When she finally regained consciousness, she didn't know how long she had been lying there. Her cheek was against the cold ties. Her belly felt tight. Panic surged through her. "My baby," she whispered hoarsely. She tried to move. Her body resisted her like it no longer belonged to her. Slowly, carefully, she rolled onto her side, then sat up, holding her stomach, waiting for the dizziness to pass. The house was quiet. She dragged herself to the bedroom, gripping furniture for support, and saw Pastor Fred asleep, undisturbed, unaware. She stood there for a long moment, swaying, watching him breathe. She didn't wake him. Fear kept her quiet. She lay down carefully, one hand on her belly, staying awake until morning, afraid that sleep might take something from her she couldn't afford to lose. The next morning, when the dizziness didn't stop, she went to the hospital by herself. Her blood pressure was low. The doctor asked about her diet, her rest, her stress levels. Victoria answered vaguely. Tests were ordered, then the cost was mentioned. Her account balance stared back at her, empty. She stepped outside the hospital, sat on a bench, and called her mother. She didn't explain, she couldn't. Her mom sent the money. Victoria cried, not because she was weak, but because marriage had failed her at a time she was most vulnerable. One evening, overwhelmed and desperate, she confided in her closest friend, another pastor's wife. "Is it like this for you too?" Victoria asked carefully. Her friend stared at her, confused. "No, my husband handles the house. I support when I can." Victoria's heart cracked. When she finally told her story, her friend cried with her, but offered little beyond prayer. God will touch his heart, she said softly. Victoria prayed and prayed and prayed. Nothing changed. The pregnancy went smoothly. Each hospital visit ended with the same reassurance. The baby was fine and there was nothing to worry about. Victoria held on to that. She carried to term. When the time came, she gave birth at the hospital without complications. It was painful, exhausting, but safe. A healthy baby boy was placed in her arms, and she whispered a quiet prayer of thanks. Pastor Fred came later that day. He prayed over her briefly, thanked God for a safe delivery, held the baby for a few minutes, then stepped out to answer calls, ministry matters. Victoria watched him from the hospital bed. Her body sore, her heart strangely empty. Motherhood did not ease Victoria's load. It added to it. Days blended into nights, and nights into mornings without rest. She moved through her routines, tired and alert at the same time, carrying her son on one arm and worry on the other. The house ran on her strength. The bills rested on her salary. One morning, she woke up tired in a way sleep could not fix. She didn't wake up that morning planning to report her husband. In fact, the thought terrified her. She sat on the edge of the bed long after Pastor Fred had left for an early meeting. Her hands folded tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the wall. The house was quiet except for her son's soft breathing. Outside, life moved normally. Inside her chest, everything was loud. She had prayed, she had endured, she had waited. But something inside her had reached its limit. The previous night replayed itself in her mind again and again. She had asked him softly, carefully, if he could give her money for food and baby supplies. He didn't shout. He didn't insult her. He simply looked at her and said, almost bored, "Use your salary." That was all. No concern, no explanation. She had gone to the bathroom afterward, fighting the urge to scream. It wasn't even the words anymore. It was the normalcy of them. The way neglect had become routine. That morning, Victoria stood up slowly and made a decision she had resisted for months. She would go to his spiritual father, not to accuse, not to disgrace, but to survive. The man's house was modest but dignified. When Victoria arrived, her palms were sweating. She adjusted her blouse twice before knocking. The older man looked surprised to see her alone. "Victoria," he said gently, ushering her inside. "Where is Fred?" She swallowed. I came to see you, sir." He studied her more closely then. The weight loss, the tired eyes, the stiffness in her movement. Something in his expression shifted. They sat. At first, words refused to come. When they finally did, they poured out in broken pieces. She told him everything. How she paid the rent, how she fed the house, how she handled pregnancy alone, how she collapsed and borrowed money secretly, how she had begged, pleaded, prayed. She spoke quietly, but her voice shook. "I don't want to disgrace him," she said quickly, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how much longer I can carry this." The man leaned back, his face hardening, not with anger, but with disappointment. "This is serious," he said slowly. He opened his Bible. "Do you know what scripture says?" he asked. She shook her head. He read aloud. "If anyone does not provide for his relatives, and especially for members of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." He closed the Bible with a firm snap. "This is not a small issue, my daughter. This is failure." Victoria felt both relief and fear. Relief that someone finally named the injustice. Fear of what would follow. "I will call Fred," the man said. "Both of you will come together." Her stomach dropped. When they returned days later, Pastor Fred was calm, almost too calm. He greeted the spiritual father respectfully, sat upright, Bible in hand. Victoria sat beside him, her heart pounding. The man wasted no time. "Fred," he said, Your wife has told me something disturbing. Pastor Fred turned to Victoria, surprise flickering across his face. She says you do not take responsibility for your home. Silence. Fred cleared his throat. I give, he said. I serve. I sacrifice. The man raised his hand. Outside, he corrected. What about inside? Fred shifted. My wife works, he said carefully. We support each other. You are the head. Support does not mean abandonment. He quoted scripture after scripture about leadership, about love, about responsibility. A man who gives to the world but starves his home is not generous, he said. He is performative. Victoria held her breath. Your ministry does not excuse neglect. The man continued. Your calling does not replace your duty. Your wife is not your financier. Fred said nothing. You will change, the man concluded. Not for reputation, for righteousness. The meeting ended quietly, but the storm was waiting at home. The moment they got home and the door shut behind them, Pastor Fred exploded. How dare you? He shouted. Victoria flinched. How dare you take our marriage outside? I was dying, she whispered. You embarrassed me, he roared. You made me look irresponsible. I needed help. You betrayed me. He paced the room like a caged animal. If you ever involve a third party in our marriage again, he said, stopping inches from her face, you will regret it. Fear crawled into her bones. She nodded, apologized, begged. That night, she slept beside a stranger. For 1 week, he changed. He dropped money, paid bill, bought groceries. Then it stopped, and Victoria learned something painful. Correction without conviction never lasts. She returned to smiling in church, to absorbing praise that felt like mockery, to hearing testimonies of his generosity while calculating what she could skip eating that week. She stopped hoping for sudden miracles. Some nights, she lay awake wondering if she had chosen wrong, if her dream had blinded her, if the crown she chased was cutting into her scalp. And yet, she stayed, because she was a pastor's wife, because people were watching, because living felt like failure, because pain has a way of teaching you how to perform. Victoria became an expert performer. By the time her son turned 9 months, she could smile through exhaustion, nod through hunger, laugh through resentment. She had mastered the art of appearing fulfilled while quietly unraveling. In church, she glowed. At home, she faded. Sunday mornings were her hardest. She would wake before dawn, bathe her son, dress him carefully, then stand in front of the mirror, adjusting her face the way some women adjusted makeup. Not too sad, not too tired, not too honest. She practiced her smile until it looked natural. Grace, she whispered to her reflection. Just grace. At church, women rushed to greet her. Mama, you look radiant. Pastor is such a blessing. Your home must be full of joy. Victoria nodded, her lips curving automatically. Yes, it's God. What else could she say? They didn't see the unpaid bills folded inside the Bible. They didn't know her child's food money came from borrowing. They didn't hear the quiet conversations she had with God late at night, asking questions she felt guilty for asking. Lord, did I misunderstand you? Did I force words you never sent? Sometimes, while Pastor Fred preached passionately about sacrifice and giving, she sat, hands clasped tightly, wondering who exactly the sermon was for, because she had given until there was nothing left to give, not even herself. At home, her body began to protest. She lost weight rapidly. Her hair thinned. Headaches became constant companions. There were days she forgot to eat, not because she was fasting, but because there was nothing left after paying for everyone else's needs. One evening, she gathered courage again. Fred, she said quietly, I am tired. Tired how? I can't keep carrying everything alone. He sighed, irritation flickering across his face. Victoria, you worry too much. God sees your sacrifice. She wanted to scream, God sees, but do you? Instead, she nodded. That night, she cried silently into her pillow, careful not to wake him. Crying loudly felt dangerous now. Anything that disrupted peace was dangerous. Church members kept coming. Stories kept pouring in. Pastor paid my school fees. Pastor sent food when we were hungry. Pastor is such a giver. They told these stories to her face. She congratulated them. She hugged them. She thanked God aloud while her chest burned. One afternoon, a woman knelt before her after service. Mama, please, thank Pastor for me. He saved my family. Victoria smiled, her vision blurring. You're welcome, she said, though the word tasted bitter. Saved your family, she thought, and drained mine. At work, the cracks became harder to hide. Her performance dipped. Her manager noticed. You've been distracted lately, he said gently. Is everything okay at home? She hesitated, then smiled. Yes, just adjusting to motherhood. Another lie added to the growing pile. The breaking point didn't come loudly. It came on an ordinary Tuesday. Victoria had just returned from work when she felt dizzy. The room spun, her legs buckled. She grabbed the table, missed it, and crashed to the floor. Her son began to cry from his crib. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, her heart pounding wildly, her vision narrowed. For a terrifying moment, she wondered if this was how people died, quietly, unnoticed, in their own living rooms. So, this is it, she thought. I will die here. Summoning strength she didn't know she had, she crawled towards her phone. Her fingers trembled as she dialed her friend, one of the few people outside church who knew bits of her struggle. Please, Victoria whispered when the call connected. I'm not okay, I need help. Her friend rushed over and took her to the hospital. The diagnosis wasn't dramatic. Severe exhaustion, malnutrition, stress-induced collapse. But the doctor's words cut deeper than any diagnosis. You need rest, he said firmly. This lifestyle will kill you if you continue. That day, Victoria thought about her son growing without her, about Pastor Fred standing at the altar with another woman someday, calling her my wife, while people praised his strength. Something inside her shifted. When she confided fully in her friend days later, the advice came carefully. I'm not telling you to divorce, her friend said, but you need space, peace. If you stay like this, you won't survive. Victoria resisted at first. How will it look? What will people say? What about the church? Her friend held her hand tightly. What about you? Those words followed her home. They echoed in her head while she cooked, while she cleaned, while she smiled through another Sunday service. She tried to pray them away. She tried to rebuke the thought. But words, once planted, grew roots. Then came the night that sealed it. She had just returned from church when the pain hit again, sharp, suffocating. She collapsed. Her son slept peacefully while she struggled to breathe. Darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. In that moment, fear gave way to clarity. I don't want to die like this. The next morning, she packed a small bag, just essentials, clothes, documents, her son's things. She left quietly, like someone slipping out of a burning house before the flames noticed. She turned off her phone. Pastor Fred noticed her absence by evening. Calls went unanswered, messages undelivered. Panic crept in. He called her parents, nothing. Friends, nothing. For the first time in years, fear visited him. 3 days later, Victoria turned her phone back on. I am safe, she texted. I just need time. When they finally sat together weeks later, she spoke, not as a pastor's wife, not as a helper, not as a silent supporter, but as a woman fighting for her life. I am tired of dying quietly, she said. I need you to hear me. Pastor Fred wept. He apologized. He promised change. And for the first time in a long while, Victoria wasn't sure whether hope was returning or whether she had simply learned to hope carefully. What she didn't know yet was that change, even when promised, often comes slowly and sometimes reluctantly. When Victoria returned home, the house felt unfamiliar. It was the same walls, the same furniture, the same quiet ticking of the clock in the living room. But something had shifted, or maybe she had. Pastor Fred welcomed her with tears, not the polished tears he shed at the altar during emotional sermons, but messy ones. His voice broke as he apologized again and again. "I failed you," he said. "I didn't know it was this bad." Victoria listened without interrupting. She had learned that apologies were easy. Change was a real test. The first few weeks were different. Pastor Fred began leaving money on the table before going out. He paid for groceries. He covered hospital visits. When bills came, he didn't pretend not to see them. He even asked what the house needed. People noticed. "You look rested," church members said. "Mama, you are glowing." Victoria smiled, cautiously this time. At home, she slept longer, ate better, laughed more easily with her son. Her body slowly recovered, though the fear lingered. Healing, she learned, wasn't instant. It came in layers. Yet, beneath Pastor Fred's efforts, something else brewed. He began to grow restless. Whenever he gave money at home, his mood shifted. He became quiet, withdrawn, some days irritable. Victoria noticed how his generosity outside slowed while his obligations inside increased. It was as though something inside him resisted the balance. One night, she overheard him praying. "God," he said softly, "I feel restrained." Restrained. The word settled heavily in her chest. Months passed. He continued providing, but reluctantly. Faithfully, but not freely. Victoria could feel it. The joy he once carried when giving to outsiders did not follow him home. He obeyed, but his heart wrestled. One evening, after a long silence, Pastor Fred finally spoke. "I feel like I've lost myself," he said. "I used to give without thinking. Now everything feels calculated." Victoria took a deep breath. "Fred," she said gently, "giving shouldn't destroy your home." He frowned. "But isn't ministry sacrifice?" "Yes," she replied, "but not neglect, not abandonment, not at the expense of your own family." He looked away. That conversation marked the beginning of a long, uncomfortable journey, one without applause, one without church praise, one where Pastor Fred had to confront something deeper than finance, his understanding of calling. Over time, he began to see it, how he used generosity as identity, how public giving fed his ego, how home responsibilities felt invisible because no one clapped for them. Years passed. Slowly, painfully, Pastor Fred learned balance. Not perfectly, not easily, but sincerely. He began budgeting, planning, saying no sometimes to outsiders. He started seeing his family not as a background support system for ministry, but as the first ministry itself. Victoria watched this change with cautious hope. Some scars remained. There were days resentment resurfaced. Days she remembered lying on the floor, unsure if she would leave. Days fear whispered, "What if he changes back?" But she also saw effort, and effort, she learned, mattered. One quiet evening, years later, Victoria sat watching her son do his homework while Pastor Fred washed dishes in the kitchen. The sound startled her, not because it was loud, but because it once felt impossible. She realized something then. Envy is built on appearances. Admiration feeds on performance. But truth lives in private rooms. People still envy their marriage. They still admire their husband. They still praise their home. She simply smiled, this time not bleeding, because she knew the truth. She knew how close she had come to disappearing. She knew the cost of silent endurance. She knew that love without responsibility is just performance. And most importantly, she knew this: a crown is useless if it crushes your head. A calling is dangerous if it silences your pain. And no dream, no matter how spiritual, should cost you your life. Victoria had wanted to be a pastor's wife. What she became instead was something stronger, a woman who learned that peace is not disobedience, that survival is not rebellion, and that sometimes the bravest faith is choosing to live. I hope you enjoyed her story. Please give it a like, share it, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for always watching. Goodbye.